Welcome back to my MATLAB course. Alex Louis here. Today, what we're going to do is first I'm going to teach you a little bit of MATLAB basics. And I'm going to show you some MATLAB commands on the command line. We've already gone over how MATLAB application works. So let's get started. So when we talk about MATLAB, the first thing that comes to mind in terms of fundamentals is learning about variables. And a variable is basically just you can think of it as a box where you can store things, but you can only store one thing at a time. Every little variable has a syntactical representation when you're going to assign something to it. So if you see on the current slide, you see that you have the left hand is a variable. The equal sign is called an assignment statement with a particular expression. So for now, we're just going to assign little values here and there, maybe 3 or 4, or just a simple numeric literal. So when I say numeric literal, I'm just talking about any integer or floating point number. Okay, so what this expression will do is it's going to assign, let's say I do x equals 5. It's going to assign a number to my variable, and my variable name could be anything that I want. Usually in MATLAB we use shorthanded variables with letters, so A, B, C, D, or X, or the more you get involved in writing more complicated scripts, you should be using more descriptive variable names. There's a couple of rules when you do variable name. They have to begin with an alphanumeric letter, and then following that it should be a combination of letters, digits, or underscores. And then you only have a limit of, I think, 19 characters that are retained. So I don't know why you would want to declare a variable longer than that. So for now, as you see the examples that I will do on MATLAB, you'll see that I just use one letter variables. Now, MATLAB is case sensitive, so a variable x doesn't necessarily mean it's a variable uppercase x. So you have to be careful when you assign variables in MATLAB. But you'll see that I'll show you a couple of examples on that as well. So all variables in MATLAB are matrices, and there are different types of, we can call them data types, MATLAB data types. And we start out with something called a scalar. So a scalar is basically just a 1-by-1 matrix. Okay, but we still, the technical term in MATLAB, it's called a scalar variable. Okay, so whenever you hear me reference something as a scalar, you know that it does represent one value, but in actuality, it's one value which is a 1-by-1 matrix. Okay, 1-by-1, so one row, one column. Okay, so, and then the other thing you have to know is that MATLAB does follow the rigorous rules of linear algebra, although with the latest versions, they've kind of held off a bit on those restrictions. Well, and you'll see that there's more flexibility with the MATLAB commands. Okay, and it does allow you to do operations between matrices, vectors, and again, scalars. Okay, so the most initial primitive data type that we have right now is going to be a scalar. So you could also have a different type of variable called a string. Okay, so if you see the example there, the first example is going to be a floating point data type. That's a scalar. They're both scalars, except that the second scalar is actually a string scalar. Okay, so when you create the variable itself, the data type will be referenced. So as soon as you create x equals 5.2, then MATLAB is going to say, okay, this is a decimal. Although all default numeric variables that you assign are going to be floating point. Okay, so they're going to be what we call a double. We went over this already. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's go into some examples on MATLAB, and we can take a look at these examples in the actual MATLAB environment. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to create a scalar, how to assign values to a scalar variable, and then do a little bit of some operations. So we're just going to grab what we see here and execute them first on the command line, and then we will execute them on the actual scripting, okay, on the scripting editor.